Our closing speaker is actually the founder of Blue Ridge Ruby, and here he is now, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks everybody. It's good to be here. Welcome to a Rubyist guide to existential dread. Thank you. Have you felt it? A vague sense of dread and foreboding in our industry and our community over the last 18 months? For me, it's been a lot of little things building up. Seeing my lead slow down last year and hearing the same from other freelancers and agency owners. Watching the listings on Ruby and Rails job boards dwindle. Watching some friends with a Rails agency have to let their employees go and ultimately close their doors. Finding out that next year will be the last RailsConf. Hearing over and over in tech news that AI is taking or is about to take my job. And even listening to Obi Fernandez at Sin City Ruby a couple months ago, warning us that a wave of change is coming. And while optimistic about Ruby's place in that wave, confident that our work as programmers will change forever. I'm guessing you have some anecdotes and data points of your own. I've never been to Silicon Valley, but this isn't my first time in a valley. This isn't the first time that I've seen our industry and our community overshadowed by threats without or within, but I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't affecting me. As I've had conversations with folks on this topic recently, whether at conferences, on a podcast, or just DMing friends, I've been trying to gain clarity on my own thoughts and feelings and on how I should respond. While it's uncomfortable, I'm trying to hold these threats with a steady gaze and consider what they're trying to tell me. And I've come to the conclusion that for me, at the bottom of it all, it's about the fear of loss. In particular, the loss of three things I care very much about. Loss of craft, loss of livelihood, and loss of community. Let me take these three things in the order that I discovered them. I fell in love with building websites as a teenager in the mid-90s, and I fell in love with building web applications with Ruby and Rails in 2008. For me, no other art or craft pursuit has matched the obsession that I've had with building software and the pleasure of seeing things that I've made on the web. Although I was hooked immediately, my skill as a developer was pretty slow in coming. And 2 decades later, I would be deeply lost if my craft was suddenly gone. Livelihood. I never really intended for my teenage hobby to become my vocation, but it turned out to be a natural fit. I was able to make enough money to support my growing family. I found that my skills allowed me to have an outsized impact in small organizations. And over time, I found a way that I could work on my own, getting greater amount of autonomy and ownership. And while some folks enter programming through community, for me, community was the last piece to arrive. I learned HTML over dial-up in the middle of corn country. Later, I worked in settings where I was frequently the only developer. I made attempts to find professional camaraderie at meetups in my 20s, but I struggled to find my place. It's only been in the last few years that I've found the connection and friendship that I'd always wanted to have. When I think about these three things, about the work involved, the time measured in years, and the extraordinary luck of it all, it's quite reasonable that threats would feel significant and worrisome. For me, peering into the future, it boils down to the following question. Will I still be able to make a living doing work I enjoy with people I care about? I think it's sometimes helpful to address the feelings behind a question before addressing the question itself. As we all know, context is critical, and a question changes the one who asks it. With that in mind, let me share the 6 things that I've been telling myself. Number 1, don't panic. I mean, not that you ever would, but I certainly might. When my kids were little, they were pretty accident prone, so we had many trips to the emergency room. As a young dad, I would often panic in these situations, emotionally flooded, unable to think straight, and barely able to take action. Thankfully, my wife was always calm and collected, and each time we got our kids the help that they needed. You see, my response was completely understandable. It just wasn't helpful. Looking back, having gone through those challenging experiences, I see that if I could have avoided panicking, I'd be more capable of taking care of myself and others. When I think about our industry currently, it helps to remind myself of the following. Being alive is inherently dangerous. My safety, stability, and comfort were never guaranteed. While I often am safe, stable, and comfortable, there's no amount of money or power that I can get that'll ensure I'll always be so. I have been through hard times before. I can look back and see that I've made it through scary and uncertain times like 9/11, the 2008 housing crisis, and COVID. In my work, I've made it through a couple boom and bust cycles, predictions of industry disruption, warnings that Ruby is dead, that Rails can't scale, and that everyone is moving on to Clojure, Elixir, and Go. I rarely wish for the past. When I think about it, it's rare that I actually want to go back to the past. I don't want to live in a time without asthma inhalers, air conditioning, video calls, carbonated water, movie theaters, and GPS. In my work, I don't want to go back to building HTML layouts with tables and transparent GIFs. I don't want to code without version control. I don't want to deploy with FTP. And I don't want to manage Ruby gems without Bundler. And this leads me to my second point. 2, cherish now. If I'm scared of what I have to lose, that also means that I have a lot to be grateful for right now. Reminds me of this tweet I saw the other day. If you're not regularly blown away at how lucky you are to program computers, I highly recommend spending a few minutes just considering the luck of it all, the timing, the circumstances, everything. In average social circles, I often talk to people who do not like their jobs, and some don't even expect to. I'm grateful that I love my work. Building software has taught me a lot about the world, about people and systems, about organizations and industries. I'm grateful for what I've learned. Have you ever tried to explain the Ruby community to people outside this profession? I found it very difficult to do. It's hard to convey that while it's true that we're a professional community, it feels more like we're a group of enthusiasts or hobbyists or artists. How would you ever explain to someone why the lucky stuff is outside Ruby? I'm grateful for the community I've built. I'm able to support my family from a small office in my house with customers around the country with skills I learned mostly for free, using equipment that fits easily into my backpack and operating costs that many service workers would envy. I'm grateful for the life I've been able to build. So instead of becoming paralyzed by some possible dark future, how can I continue to make now better? And not just for me, but for those around me. My next 3 points are categories of action, accompanied by examples of Rubyists that I think we can take some inspiration from. People who saw something that needed to be done and went for it. Create space. Creating space, physical or virtual, temporal and attentional, is a necessary prerequisite for communities to form and grow. Creating space is about making new places for people to gather for the first time, as well as opening up gaps in existing spaces for newcomers to be welcomed in. Nothing takes me back to the painful experiences of middle school, like walking into a room full of strangers, looking around for a group to join, and finding no opening in the circle. If we want to keep Ruby community healthy, we need to create space. And here are some Rubyists that are doing just that. Andy does this in a couple different ways. He's the organizer of Brighton Ruby, one of the longest running Ruby conferences in Europe. He's also the creator of First Ruby Friend, a program connecting early career devs with Ruby mentors. Gemma and Emily are two of the organizers of WNBRB, a virtual community for women and non-binary Rubyists. They have monthly online meetups with speakers from their community, and they often host meals for their members at conferences. I'm equally thrilled and jealous I'm unable to join. Dave is a longtime Rails developer and years ago was co-founder of Block, the first online coding bootcamp. He more recently founded the Agency of Learning, an organization aimed at getting early career devs, particularly bootcamp grads, job ready. Bobby Lee noticed that the Australian Ruby community had its own Rails camp and decided to create her own version in the US. Rails Camp West is an unplugged retreat for devs of various backgrounds hosted in different locations out west every year. It's like summer camp for adults in tech. I'm always thinking of ideas, so here's my opportunities that I see. Someone should help connect local meetups to devs looking for speaking opportunities. Someone should make a Ruby conference geared toward developers with kids, a group that often can't come to conferences. Someone should provide training and support for experienced devs transitioning from other languages. Number 4, get tedious. I came across this tweet a while back from the annals of just do the tedious thing and immerse yourself fully. It's an excerpt from a New York Times article which says, the best view of New York City might just be in a near windowless conference room on the 12th floor of a midtown Manhattan office building. Splayed across 10 folding tables, a map pieced together with paper, tape, and sticky notes details every block and parcel in Manhattan below 96th Street on the east side and 110th on the west side. The map is the work of Bob Nicol, who created it by walking every avenue and street during the desolate early months of the pandemic. Updated regularly, the dots are color-coded. Lots are color-coded with highlighters and sticky notes to show which are for sale, were recently sold, are owned by the city, or are under construction. For 4 decades, Mr. Nicol has used his obsession with data and creative marketing techniques to achieve rarefied status in the cutthroat world of New York City real estate. He is widely considered by industry professionals to be the top commercial sales broker by number of transactions in the largest commercial market in the country. There's incredible value in finding and committing to one thing that to many other folks might seem tedious. So let's consider some examples from the Ruby world. Lucian is creator of the Short Ruby newsletter, which is the most in-depth weekly newsletter I've ever seen, and is so long that it always gets clipped by Gmail, so I have to click view entire message to read the whole thing in a separate tab. It's the most comprehensive news source for everything that's happened in the Ruby world in the past week. Last year, Steven went all in on SQLite and Rails, writing blog posts, improving Rails support for SQLite, creating the Active Record Enhanced SQLite 3 adapter, talking on podcasts, speaking at conferences. I think he's putting out a new book now. He's been educating folks on the benefits of using SQLite with Rails in production. Umi is a Rails developer, mentor, and educator. She writes the One Ruby Question newsletter, which tackles one question every issue, such as, how do constants work in Ruby? And when do we use Turbo 8 page refresh and morphing? It's been one of my favorite ways to level up my learning. Andrew is one of the most prolific open source authors in Ruby. In January 2020, he writes this. In August, I set out to improve the machine learning ecosystem for Ruby and wasn't sure where it would go. Over the next 5 months, I ended up releasing 16 libraries and learned a lot along the way. I wanted to share some of that knowledge and introduce some of the libraries you can use in Ruby. In September, he shares that he's released 15 more ML gems for Ruby. He writes, I'm happy to announce another round of machine learning gems for Ruby. Ruby is getting better for machine learning. Many popular Python libraries now have Ruby counterparts. They can be used in Ruby scripts, iRuby notebooks, and Rails applications. This should make it easier to do machine learning without leaving your favorite language. Now, some opportunities that I see. Someone should catalog all the tools in the Laravel community that we don't have and bring those missing ones over to Rails. Someone should find a way to connect all of those outdated Rails apps out there and make them available freelancers to maintain and upgrade. Someone should write an in-depth cookbook for real-world web scraping and HTML parsing using Nokogiri. Guess what I was working on last week? 5, sell it. As developers, we're not generally known for appreciating or excelling at marketing and sales. Maybe it's because we tend to believe that good ideas, good tools, and good practices will be self-evident and will be successful on their merits alone. But years of freelancing, many failed attempts at launching products and projects, and observations of what actually works has taught me that marketing and sales are critical. How many developers got into Ruby and Rails because of DHH's famous How to Build a Blog in 15 Minutes video? Yeah? I'm betting many of us here. I'd argue that was the most influential marketing piece in the history of web development. If you have another example that's better than that, let me know. As Irina Nazarova, CEO of Evil Martian, said during her Rails keynote earlier this month, we are not loud enough. And I would also add that we have misapplied the dry principle when it comes to communicating about our tools, our projects, and our learnings. We have to repeat ourselves. Speaking of Irina, she and Evil Martians are doing amazing work to further Ruby and Rails in the startup world. They put out the highest quality technical content, design, open source, and products. Their visual style and attention to detail make them stand out in a crowd. They are consistent, and they earn and keep attention. Talk about Marco. In addition to his extensive open source contributions, Marco has done some of the best work I've seen to promote and educate on the Hotwire approach to front end through his conference talks, his site hotwire.io, and the Hotwire weekly newsletter. Nadia is founder of the StoryGraph, the #1 competitor to Goodreads. She scaled her Rails app to millions of users and a profitable business as a one-woman dev team. She's worked incredibly hard on her product, but she's also taking time to tell her own story. And it's inspirational for many who have that dream of building a product. Matt is CTO of Arrows, creator of the Boring Rails website, host of the Yagni podcast, and runs one of the best Twitter accounts for Ruby and Rails devs. He has an incredible knack for getting noticed and sharing useful and practical developer content. Now, some opportunities that I see. Someone should host a competition to build the same web app in multiple languages and stacks with commentary and judging. Someone should make a YouTube show where guests bring on a favorite Ruby library and do a guided walkthrough. Someone should start a group to support indie Rubyist learning, marketing, and sales. Finally, number 6, go together. I'm an introvert. I'm fairly independent, and I've spent much of my developer career learning and working on my own. But for many years, I was dogged by a lack of professional community. I think it's kind of like this. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a skateboarder. Skateboarding isn't a team sport. Every skateboarder is out there doing their own thing, working at their own level. But in the skate videos I saw, skateboarders were always together in the park or on the street. If you pulled off a trick, someone was there to give you a high five. If you took a bad spill, they were groaning and or laughing, but they saw you and they knew. If the neighbors got called or if the neighbors got pissed or the cops got called, everybody would be hightailing it together. The boring term for this is a community of practice. This is my community of practice. I may not be working on the same product for the same company as everyone else, but in a sense, we are working, learning, and practicing together. I know that if I get stuck or need help, I can find it. I know if I make something and share it, I'll get some encouragement and feedback. I know if I was struggling to find work or if I got burnt out, there are at least a dozen people I could reach out to, people who'd care. I think I lucked out because I don't know of any other community like this one, and personally, I'm planning to be here for the long haul. So let me now come back to the future. Sorry. I could make some predictions about AI or about the pendulum swings of languages and tooling trends, but the truth is I really don't know. So let me share you some things that I'm reasonably confident about. Nothing lasts forever, not even hard times. In living systems, growth isn't what matters, health is. Small is fine as long as it's healthy. Ship of Theseus rules everything around us, from our bodies and communities to tooling and language. Identity is really just in continuity. Human interests will always require human attention, human choice, human responsibility. Going through hardship can help people, companies, and communities develop wisdom and fitness. Better to build confidence in skill and adaptability than confidence in market conditions and forecasts. As bad as you think things are for you, someone else has it worse. Lend a hand and make both your lives richer. There's no limit to the needs of the world, the work to be done, and the ways that we can show up and care. So, back to my question. In 2 or 3 decades, as I'm nearing the end of my career, will I still be able to make a living doing work I enjoy with people I care about? I don't have 100% certainty about this, and I never will, but I think so. And maybe more importantly, I'm going to act as if. And when I finally get there, it wouldn't surprise me that if whatever I'm working on had something to do with Ruby. Thanks.